The other type of point mutation I want to talk about is frame shift mutations. A frame shift mutation happens when we insert or remove a base, and we call it a frame shift because it's going to change everything we say in the reading frame after or downstream after that insertion or deletion has happened. Insertions will be adding a base into your DNA sequence. Deletions will be removing it, right? So I think it's always good to think about where would this mutation probably have the biggest effect? Would it have a worse effect if you say at the beginning or the end of a gene? Well, typically it would be at the beginning of a gene, right? Because where this insertion or deletion happens, we know that everything after it is going to be affected. And so the earlier on in your gene that it happens, the more things are going to be affected by it. So frame shift mutations, the earlier on in the sequence they occur, typically the more detrimental or the bigger change that we see. One example of this is with something called cystic fibrosis. So cystic fibrosis affects multiple parts of the body, including the pancreas, your sweat glands, and lungs, right? Typically, it has to do with problems of diffusion and osmosis of things in and out of your cells, which is why lungs get particularly affected. People without cystic fibrosis have a small layer of salt water in large airways in their lungs, and this kind of allows mucus to line the airways, and mucus layer will help clear dust and other inhaled particles, right? But when we look at those people with cystic fibrosis, this layer of mucus really kind of builds up. And so it makes it harder, it's thickened, it makes it harder for things to go in and out, and it's typically challenging for them to kind of release this mucus as well, which means it's not really a good thing. In fact, lots of people, if they don't receive treatment, die at a very young age of cystic fibrosis. So how does cystic fibrosis occur? Cystic fibrosis is a mutation in what we say is the CFTR gene, and it causes the CFTR protein to malfunction or not be made at all. And this is what leads to the buildup of thick mucus, which turns into persistent lung infections, destruction of your pancreas, and complications with other organisms. So cystic fibrosis is actually an example of a recessive disease. You need two of these in order to have it be expressed, right? But when it does, the loss of function of that particular amino acid can be pretty detrimental and influential on your life. So those are our two types of mutations that we see when we talk about point mutations. We saw substitution, or we saw frame shift mutations, and how they can affect phenotype.